You know how sometimes a totally routine task can unravel something huge? Well, what if a simple paperwork review in a county office accidentally uncovered a 40-year-old problem, a problem involving hundreds of thousands of your tax dollars paid to an organization with a very, very big secret? Today, we're diving into an investigation that started just like that. So let's just start with this bombshell question, because it is right at the heart of what a county official in Tennessee recently stumbled upon. This whole story is about oversight, it's about public trust, and really, it's about what happens when the most basic checks and balances seem to just disappear for almost half a century. So, how on earth does something like this even come to light? Well, it wasn't some big dramatic sting operation or a secret whistleblower. Nope, it started quietly, with one person just doing their job, going through a routine review of county expenses. The assessor for Rutherford County, a guy named Rob Mitchell, was just looking over the professional memberships his office was paying for. The process should have been super simple. First, you ask the organization itself, in this case, the Tennessee Association of Assessing Officers, or TNAAO, for some basic paperwork. But when those requests went unanswered, he moved on to checking public records, a pretty logical next step that turned out to be, well, incredibly revealing. And this is what he found. Now, I want you to look really closely at the date on this slide. That is not a typo. According to the official record from the Tennessee Secretary of State, the TNAO was administratively dissolved on March 17th of 1983. 1983. So what in the world does that legal jargon administratively dissolved actually mean? Well, it is not a minor slip-up. It's when the state officially yanks a corporation's charter because it's failed to do basic legal things, like file reports or pay fees. And here's the absolute crucial points. From that day forward, the organization legally ceased to exist. It was a ghost. It couldn't legally open a bank account, sign a contract, or cash a check from the government. And the red flags just kept popping up, one after another. The digging was thorough. The TNAO never provided its own documents. It had zero active state registration. Couldn't be found in the IRS database or nonprofit trackers. There was no record of it operating under any other name either. From every single official angle you could look at it, it was a ghost corporation that was still cashing taxpayer checks. Okay, so if the organization didn't legally exist, where was all the money going? Well, that is the next and most expensive part of this whole story. And we are talking about some serious public funds here. First up, let's just look at Rutherford County, where this all began. Records show that since 2012 alone, the county paid almost $34,000 in membership dues to the TNAO. And believe me, that was just the tip of the iceberg. But it wasn't just one county. Get this. Even the state comptroller's office, the very agency that's supposed to be Tennessee's financial watchdog, had paid out over $24,000 for things like training and services to this phantom organization. But the biggest number, by far, comes from the University of Tennessee. Reports show the university was sending $75,000 of public money every single year to the TNAO. That adds up to a staggering $375,000 in just the last 5 years. And right here is where the scale of this whole thing just slaps you in the face. When you add up just these known payments, you get a minimum of over $433,000 taxpayer dollars funneled to an organization that, on paper, has been defunct since the early 80s. And that just forces you to ask this critical question, right? If the office we all see as the state's money cop was making payments itself, what does that say about the systemic oversight that's supposed to protect our money across all state and county agencies? But this story isn't just about sloppy bookkeeping. Oh no. When you have this much money flowing around with what looks like zero oversight, you have to start asking, who was benefiting? And that brings us to some really serious questions about influence and potential conflicts of interest. So it turns out the executive director for this non-existent organization is also a registered county lobbyist. Now think about that for a second. The same person leading an entity funded by our tax dollars is also paid to influence our elected officials. It really raises the question, are public funds being used to pay lobbyists who might then advocate for policies that aren't actually in the public's best interest? That dual role is a major, major red flag. Assessor Rob Mitchell, the guy who uncovered all this, he puts it very carefully. He presents the evidence, the dissolved status, the public funding, this lobbying connection, and then he basically says, look, I'm just laying out the facts. You decide what it all means. He's not pointing fingers, but he is pointing to a set of facts that just screams for an explanation.
And then, this story takes another turn. Just 5 days after Mitchell brought his findings to state officials, his own office gets hit with a surprise non-compliance report. Mitchell himself has publicly questioned the timing, suggesting it feels an awful lot like someone was trying to discredit his work and maybe retaliate for digging into this whole mess.
So, with all of this now out in the open, what happens next? Well, the source documents for this story don't just point out the problem, they actually provide a roadmap for citizens who want to demand some real accountability. The first place to look for answers is at the state level. People are being encouraged to ask their representatives some pretty pointed questions, like, will you support a full forensic audit to trace every single dollar? Will you call for an immediate stop to all payments? And crucially, what new safeguards are you going to put in place so a 40-year oversight failure like this can never, ever happen again? The pressure is also on local officials to clean up their own house. The key questions for them are pretty direct. Do you support getting that money back? What policies do you have to make sure every single vendor is legit? And are you going to audit all the other memberships to see if this was a one-off or a much bigger problem? But ultimately, the biggest questions are for the highest offices in the state. Citizens are asking the governor and attorney general to step in and launch a full-scale investigation, not just to figure out how this happened for 4 decades, but to determine if any laws were actually broken along the way. And if you want to ask these questions yourself, the original report actually provides direct links so you can find your specific state and local representatives. It's really about putting the power of accountability right back into the hands of citizens. And that really brings us to our final thought here. This whole investigation has revealed a stunning, multi-decade breakdown in the most basic financial oversight. It leaves all of us with a fundamental question that goes way beyond Tennessee. When the systems designed to protect public money completely fail, who is ultimately left to hold power accountable? The answer, it seems, is anyone who's willing to do a routine review.